Hi, my name is Dane. I'm a Mohs technologist with Samaritan Medical Center Dermatology. I work with Dr. Maletta up here in Watertown. We're going to be doing a immunohistochemistry on Mohs fresh tissue slides. We're going to be doing SOX10 antibody for melanoma specifically. What I've got over here is two timers. I've got one timer for each of the steps going through, and then I've just got a timer over here that's basically just going to keep track of the overall process, just get an idea of approximately how long the whole thing takes from start to finish, not including actually freezing and cutting the specimen, obviously. So we're just going to get it going first in the 10% neutral buffered formalin. Most of the time this is done in acetone, but because we're doing SOX10 for melanoma, it's a nuclear stain instead of cytoplasmic. So we need to use the formalin to get a lot deeper into the cell. So this is for fixation, to get the section on fixed to the slide, but also for permeabilization of the tissue. So we got our control slide, and we got our patient specimen. And typically, what we do is we do one H&E per patient specimen. We've got our control, which is previously validated by the dermatologist, and then we do two IHC slides. But for today's purposes, we're just going to do the one slide. This is a specimen that's already come in for the melanoma was biopsied, confirmed melanoma. We did Mohs to clear it, and I then bisected through the specimen so that we could get right through and try to get see if we could see the actual melanoma itself right through the lesion. The reagents that we use are from Novodiax. They're IHC Direct. It's a rapid immunohistochemical stain. One of the reasons I like Novodiax, and I believe there are other companies that do this, but they conjugate their antibody with the horseradish peroxidase step, which is in typical in other stains. Those are typical two separate steps. We're going to rinse. And this is just DI water with Tris buffer, which also comes from Novodiax. It just makes sure the water's buffered. And the rinse step is really important. This is typically where a lot of techs, myself included, have trip up a lot, is not rinsing off the previous step. Ended up getting a lot of muddy stains and not really, either it's not sticking very well or it's sticking a little too well to parts of the tissues where it's not supposed to be. And make sure edge dry the slide very well.
Is Doc in a room?
And then we put on our cover tiles. These are just cover tiles that I use. You don't have to use these. This is something I started doing. These are cover tiles that are used with the Leica Bond IHC machine. And what they do is they allow me to get that capillary action. So instead of just taking the reagents, these are droppers. We could just drop them on the slide. A drop is typically 40 to 60 microliters. That's a little too imprecise for me. So what I decided to do is get the micropipette with the actual amount so that I could track the reagents, and that's better for cost effectiveness. It's better for consistency throughout the tests. And so what the cover tiles allow us to do is, again, get that capillary action, so I don't have to throw 3, 4, 5 drops onto the slide in order to get the tissue covered. This just spreads the antibody or the reagent or whatever across the entire slide. Press it a little bit. And that's a 5-minute incubation with a SOX10 antibody right there. Oops, there we go. So like I said, this way I can use typically the bond will use, I believe it's 150 microliters per slide, and I've been able to tweak this and play around with it a little bit, kind of move the cover tiles around so that I can get away with using 50, or excuse me, I can get away with using 100 microliters per slide, which is 50 microliters less. It doesn't sound like a lot, 150 to 100, but you know, when you're dealing with these very expensive 5 milliliter antibodies, that can be the difference between being able to do 10 extra tests. If you're a smaller clinic, that, you know, can be a huge difference in cost. So again, with the timer, this is just to give an overall idea. Typically, I'm not talking through the process as I'm going through it, or I'm, you know, working on another case as such. So it's not going to be exact, but the SOX 10 is one of the longer stains, just because it does have an extra step with an enhancer. Because we're staining for nuclear stain, we need the neutral buffered formalin to penetrate deeper, and then we need an enhancing reagent to help bring out the chromogen even more in the nucleus. This is typically not needed in your cytoplasmic stains. There are other antibodies that have additional steps. I know pancytokeratin or cytokeratin cocktail CK7. They use a blocker because you actually have the opposite effect. You end up with too much staining. So the blocker prevents that chromogen from staining more tissue than it should be. But like I said, I was saying earlier, with the conjugated HRP, they put the HRP in with the antibody. So it's one step. It's 5 minutes, whereas this would have been two separate steps. You would have had to do the antibody and then the HRP is two separate steps. So cuts back on time. You know, anywhere that you can trim off a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Obviously, when you're doing Mohs, that's kind of important to the patient as they're waiting on us. So this can already add a little bit of time, but it pays off in you know, diagnostic capability for the doctor.